Hi everybody, it's Peter Schiff. It's Tuesday, October 12th, 2010. The dollar's had a bit of a reprieve the last day or two. It rallied a bit on Monday and again this morning. Still looks like it's in a downtrend to me, and it looks that way to Goldman Sachs as well. I was reading an article that was describing their now forecast for a sharp drop in the dollar. But listen how a newspaper wrote about that. It's very interesting. This is a quote. I'm reading this. The investment bank expects the dollar to drop to 179 against the pound in 6 months and 185 in 12 months. Sterling closed at 158 in London yesterday. The euro won't be spared either, with the dollar slump forcing it to 150 6 months from now and 155 in a year. Notice the adjective. The euro won't be spared. Remember, it's the euro that's rising. The dollar's falling. It's the dollar that's not spared. But again, the reporter is thinking that a strong euro is a bad thing for the Europeans. That they're going to suffer an appreciating currency. This is really an Orwellian world that we live in, doublespeak, where white is black and up is down, that somehow a strong currency is bad and a weak currency is good. Getting richer is a bad thing. Getting a pay raise is a bad thing. Having your pay slashed, well, that's a good thing. One of the consequences of a weak dollar is prices going up, particularly commodity prices. Look at what happened on Friday for corn, also soybeans, sugar. These both, I think beans and corn were limit up on Friday, up again on Monday. Corn prices are up by 60% in the last 3 months. That's 20% a month. Corn is a really important in the United States. Not only do we eat, corn on a cob, directly, but it's in all sorts of products. It's in these corn oils. It's used to make artificial sweeteners. They even use it to make toothpaste. But it's very important in feed. Chickens eat it, pigs, cows. So if it's more expensive to feed these animals, well, the prices are going to go up. Now, in the short run, some of the farmers might slaughter their herds because they can't afford to feed them. But that, in the long run, that really pushes the price up. And again, what if they're slaughtering dairy cows because they can't afford to feed them? What happens to the price of milk? We get eggs from chickens as well. So all of this is going to put pressure. And also, of course, as corn prices are surging, farmers have a decision that they can plant corn or maybe they can plant something else. So, or if farmers are planting soybeans, they might decide not to plant the soybeans. They're going to plant corn instead. And so now there's not as much soybeans. So the soybean price goes up. And of course, they're also using corn and ethanol. But all of this is a byproduct of a weakening dollar. Because remember, when the dollar goes down, that increases global demand for our agriculture exports. The world can buy more because prices are falling for them. And so prices end up rising for Americans. In other words, we're winning the currency war because we have to pay more for food. I saw a guy on CNBC who was working for a gun company. And he was describing why sales were rising for rifles. And he actually was saying that unemployed people were hunting more because they were hunting for food to eat. This is something I've been forecasting for a long time. Unfortunately, Obama is going to create a lot of jobs. People are going to be working as self-employed hunters and fishermen and self-employed farmers because they can't get real jobs, so they'll collect their unemployment checks and then they'll go out hunting and fishing. And of course, there is a benefit to that. If you actually get a job, not only do you lose your unemployment benefits, but if you earn money and then buy food, you have to pay taxes, so you can only buy food with what's left. But if you're self-employed and you hunt and find your own food, if you grow your own food in your own garden, you don't pay any taxes. You live tax-free. Of course, we lose the benefits of efficiencies, of specialization, but this is what's happening. Our standard of living is unraveling because of what the government is doing. I thought as a laugh, I heard that a former executive at Fannie Mae, I think Tom Donilon is the guy's name. He was the top guy at Fannie Mae, an advisor, and apparently now he's a national security advisor to the United States. And I'm thinking, how could this be? Could you think of a company in the history of the world that was worse than Fannie Mae? It's nobody. They lost more money than any company ever. Yet this guy is now giving us national security advice. First I thought, well, if we have the same success with national security that he had over with Fannie, that the U.S. was soon going to be an occupied province of Iran. There'd be a dusk to dawn curfew here. Farsi would be our official language. The women would be walking around in burqas. This is ridiculous. And then I read up a little bit more about it, and I found out what this guy actually did at Fannie Mae. His job was to convince the regulators not to regulate them, to convince them that everything was great, that there was no need to rein them in. So I guess in that respect, he was very successful. So then I second thought, maybe it wasn't as bad a choice as I thought at first glance when I looked at what he actually did. Anyway, on another note, I wanted to talk about all these Peter Schiff hate videos that seem to be popping up all over the place, and I think it's kind of interesting too. As more of my forecasts tend to come true, more of these guys seem to come out of the woodwork trying to take a couple of shots at me, and they usually accuse me of fraud, but what they're doing is actually fraud. I mean, one of them, for example, one guy is calling me out, saying I'm a fraud, I'm a liar, because on a video blog I did a week ago or so, I claimed that I never predicted that hyperinflation would be here in 2010. And he's trying to call me out by showing an interview I did on the Glenn Beck show about 3 years ago, in which Glenn Beck asked me, well, where do I think inflation could be in the future? And I said, well, it's possible in 2 or 3 years that we could have 20 to 30% annual inflation. Now, obviously, that hasn't happened yet, but that's not hyperinflation. I mean, hyperinflation is 20 to 30% a month, maybe more, 50 to 100% a month. That's definitely high inflation. Now, we don't have that high inflation, but it's not hyperinflation. And the reason we didn't have that inflation is because the CRB, remember, dropped by 50% in the second half of 2008. We had that huge head fake dollar rally. Had we not had that big rally, had the dollar just dropped directly after our economy imploded, we probably would be seeing that type of consumer price increases. But instead, we're going to see it maybe next year or the year after that. So I don't think my call is wrong. I think it's premature because I didn't anticipate that sharp rally in the dollar, which obviously has ended. Also, there was another video where there's just so much fraud involved in this one. First of all, I did a imitation of John Belushi when I was running for Senate to try to motivate people into helping me cold call and phone bank. And I do look a little bit psychotic in it, but that's part of the joke. And in the video, I explained, if you didn't know, that I was doing an impersonation of John Belushi from Animal House. But now all these videos are taking selective parts of that and presenting it as if I was really serious. They're not saying it's a joke, so it's actually complete fraud. Then, if you look at that one of the videos, in addition to that, they show a quote from Max Kaiser talking about how wrong I was on the dollar, how I said the dollar was going to fall, and it rose. Well, but that quote was from early 2009. This is late 2010. The dollar's at a record low against the Swiss franc. It's within 1% of a record low against the yen. It's about 1% off a record low against the Australian dollar. It's at a record low against gold. It's at a 30-year record low against silver. I mean, obviously, my call on a weak dollar was right. Now, Max Kaiser didn't know that in early 2009, but the guys that made this video surely know that in October of 2010, but they don't want to say that. They still want to create the false impression that I was wrong. And again, you can also look at how they try to distort the Senate race. There was a news story about me in the Senate race about 2 weeks before the race. And it said that Linda McMahon was beating me by more than 40 points. Rob Simmons had more than twice my support, right? I was going to get slaughtered. Now, the actual election results were a lot closer, right? Linda only beat me by 26 points. Rob Simmons didn't beat me by 100%. He only beat me by 17%. He had 3% more than I did. I actually came in second in more towns than Rob Simmons. And that's despite the fact that he was much more well-known than me. He was endorsed by every newspaper in the state except one who endorsed Linda McMahon. In fact, there was a lot of news stories about how I did much better than people thought. In fact, there was a poll that just came out last week when they were polling Lieberman running in a three-way race with a Democrat and a Republican, and the two Republicans that they chose to poll were the sitting governor, who's very popular, Jody Rell, and me. And Jody Rell only did a couple of points better than me. So the real story was that for my first race, despite Linda McMahon outspending me by 10 to 1, that I did pretty good. But no, they don't want to show the facts. They want to distort the facts. And that is the pure definition of fraud, to deliberately hide information that's contrary to what you're trying to say, to take things out of context, to present things in a manner that leads someone to assume the opposite of what's actually true. So when you look at all these videos and they call me a fraud, they call me a charlatan, they say I'm a cult leader, and then of course they disable all their comments, all their ratings. They're afraid to actually let the public actually comment on what they're saying because they don't want the public to try to clear the air and correct the misconceptions created by these people. Anyway, that's it for today. Take care, and next time I blog, I will be back in the USA. Bye-bye.